How did we even meet for the first time?
I think it was through our husbands.
Yeah.
I think.
Or your husbands to your brother in the first place.
Yes.
But yes, husbands, probably
Yes.
the strong connection.
Yes. And I'd heard about this crazy woman with her 3 boys.
3 boys and this wonderful woman with her 3 daughters.
Yeah, starting your business and
Yeah.
hearing all about that. And
Yeah.
then we met.
And now there's nothing
There's
stopping us.
chemistry.
Exactly. And we have really different approaches and ways of doing things, don't we? Which is why I think it works quite well.
Yeah, but similar in lots of ways. So I think
Yeah.
our hearts are really combined and sort
Yeah.
of really resonate around helping people become whole people.
Yeah.
And you use your gifts with Strength Finders,
Yeah.
and I use my gifts with my medicine. But I
Yeah.
think where the chemistry is between us is that passion to help people love life and enjoy
Yeah.
life and become whole.
And find their purpose.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
you're one of your big words is purpose,
Yeah.
isn't it? Why don't you say a little bit about what you do then?
Oh, okay. Okay, what do I do? I think my role, my purpose in life to help other people become brave, exceptional leaders. And by leader, I use that word quite broadly. I think we're all leaders, actually. People lead in their homes, they lead in the workplace, they lead in their families. And I think there's a real need for us to do that with real character and depth and purpose. And I just think there's so much out there, and you probably are well aware of this in your field, that's this is how you should do it, or there's this ethereal kind of response to how we should live our lives. But people need to know what that means in the right now. When I'm juggling being a mom of 3 teenage children, I'm running my business, my husband and his work, my family, elderly parents, etc., etc., etc. What does that actually mean I do tomorrow? What can I do right now to help my life be different? And my sort of mission is to make these things much more like tangible and actionable for people.
And you do that very much, like having known you and seeing you interact with other people. It's from overflow. Like even if we're having lunch just then with our lovely kale salad.
Best kale I've ever had. Easy.
And you see talking to my husband and you're drawing that out but how are you making money from that? I mean, what is your vehicle for doing that?
Good question. At the moment, the main vehicles is around coaching people, actually one-to-one coaching. I do loads of workshops with teams and groups of people that want to work together more effectively and understand each other better. And I do speaking as well, so speaking at sort of larger events where you're motivationally talking about what the difference it's made to your life. So a whole background of things, and I think another real desire I've got, which is again where we connect, because you've actually spent a bit of your life literally given over to people, that a huge amount of your life over to people who haven't had perhaps the same experiences or privileges that we've had, is I want to be able to make that kind of learning and lifestyle accessible to people that haven't had all the privileges and freedoms that I've had to grow my leadership. So that's another really big part of what I do as well. And I think what I really love, because I'm naturally nosy, is I just love to know more about people's lives, which is why you're so fascinating. And I'd like to ask you about you, because you have got a whole raft of experiences that have brought you to where you are today. And actually, that's one of the main things I talk about a lot, is that you don't end up at a point, do you, and go, oh, now I'm right in the middle of my purpose, and beforehand I wasn't. Everything you've done has been leading you towards this particular groove that you find yourself in, where you've now got your mission. How would you describe your mission?
How would I describe my mission? The thing that gets me up every morning is that I believe I can put health back into people's hands. And I believe with all of my heart that we can reverse the tide of chronic disease that is plaguing our nation, and that we now have a situation where our children are going to live not as long as we did, and I don't think that has to be the case. And I believe, like, I've created a style of medicine that's rooted in science, that is practical, that is everyday, that can help people live well and optimise their health and reverse disease, and so that's my thing.
So you're aiming at somebody like me who's living a regular kind of life, who wants to make change and do better with what I have, and to sort of understand what health is, or are you aiming at people who have more
I mean, this
chronic
is
problems?
this, you know,
Or both?
Yeah. So you know, people keep asking me that I need to narrow down who my audience is, and but my heart and passion is anybody that will listen, and that's willing to change. And I think a lot of the people I see now, so I have a small private clinic, and they're quite sick people that have gone down the medicinal route and the pharmaceutical route, and either don't have the answers, so they know they don't feel well, but they're just not getting the answers from the NHS, or they want to know what they can do alongside conventional therapy. But then I think we do have a whole generation coming up who aren't ill, but who are asking some other questions. Yeah. How do we do this well? And how do we, you know, feel great and live well? So I think it's so broad. So for me, it's anybody that wants to listen.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point, because you like you say, there's people who are already in a situation of chronic ill health, but lots of us walk around with fear or concern about our health, particularly if we've seen our parents become unwell or there's things that we feel we might be genetically predisposed to. Actually, using that phrase of putting health back into your hands gives us that sense of there's things I can do about this.
Yes.
Even people who might look and appear healthy, are we making good choices with how we live in our life? Or are we stacking up potential problems for ourselves? You know, as time goes by.
And I do think there's certainly from my own story, there's a whole group of people where we know we just don't quite feel right, but we don't fit a kind of disease category.
Yeah.
You know, we go to our GP and we have blood tests and we're told they're all normal, and so, you know, actually equipping people for what they can do to actually feel great. And I think a load of us just go around now just actually not feeling great. It's become normal, and it's not normal. And we can feel great and enjoy our life.
And look great, because you look great as well.
45.
And you always look very glowing and like you've got loads of energy. But do you always feel like that?
No, but I think I really want to live what I preach and teach and expect of my patients. And I always say to myself, I never want to ask somebody else to do something that I'm not willing to grapple with. And so I use the foundations to health that I am teaching my clients and coaching people in my own life. And I mean, I'm a mum. You're a mum, you know, my husband gets unwell at times, you know, elderly parents get unwell, and so life can throw loads of curveballs at you, and so for me, like when that happens and I get stressed and don't manage that well, first my sleep goes and then I start to get chronic migraines. And so but now I've created a way where I look at these 5 foundations in my own life and I think, okay, what can I do to really push into those, to help my body kind of gear itself to healing and to kind of get to the reset. And so, yes, I get on well, but it's one, I've learned to recognise the signs very early. And then 2, I feel like I know what to do to kind of claw that back and get back to feeling well.
And you've got these 5 foundations which are so practical and so helpful, but that's, you know, it's something that we can all grasp hold of, and that's the whole message of what you do. But how did you land there? Because you didn't just wake up one day and go, there's 5 foundations and this is, you know, what I'm going to tell everybody. It's important for people to know the story behind, because it's a bit different to me coming up with 5 foundations and just deciding this is a good idea. You know, your life journey has taken you here.
Yes,
and all around the globe as well.
So so there is a bit of a story.
Tell us. We all like a story.
I mean, I've been qualified as a GP for 16 years. I've been qualified as a doctor for 20 years. Okay. And I think right from the beginning, when I trained, I found like I was really unsettled with the way we operate as a doctor, and and at that time I just didn't have the maturity to kind of understand what it was. But as I reflect back, I realised like in medical school you learn all about how your body works and what's happening at a cellular level, and you know what all these nutrition's doing to your body, and then at year 3 it's like forget all that. You need to understand disease recognition, so you need to put people into a category. Once they're in a category, you follow a guideline. And the guidelines are often very pharmaceutically driven, because that's where the money is for research. And so it just never seemed to make sense that we went from, the person, to suddenly it's not about the person, we're treating diseases and we're following guidelines. And so, and then I think the other thing that happened, like, in general practice historically, like, we held it all together, like we knew families, we kind of knew what was going on, and again, sort of in the late 90s with medicine, in order to really exceed with excellence, we started to specialise very narrowly. So now you've got a bone doctor, but you'll have the bone doctor that only does the knee, you've got a bone doctor that does the ankle, you've got the one that does the hand, and then you've got your skin doctor, liver doctor, kidney doctor, all of this, which is brilliant. Like, we need that expertise, but it's kind of cut the body down into all of these areas with nobody holding it together. And so with the kind of pressure on general practice, you know, we were losing that continuity of care. We have lost that ability to hold all of those things that people are seeing and going through. And then also, it just didn't make sense to me, like, why wouldn't what's going on in your skin have anything to do with your gut? We cannot kind of separate these areas of the body down, and because we're kind of this integrated system of you know, kind of highways of communication in our body. So that was all going on in me.
And did you just feel that sense of, this just doesn't sit with me, I don't feel integrated, it doesn't feel like, this doesn't feel right?
Yeah, I felt like I couldn't be a whole person and a whole doctor. I felt like I had to ignore some intuition, ignore how I'm made, and I had to follow a guideline.
And just compromise.
Yeah, and compromise. And then often heavy, you know, kind of pressure to prescribe, and then people are getting sick because what we're prescribing, so you prescribe more, and then because of the pressure of like seeing 40 patients a day and you just want to get through them, that you just, you know, I felt like a pharmaceutical kind of vending machine, like diabetes, ding ding ding, here's your free drugs. And so that was all going on. I spent some years in Africa and then came back, and I loved general practice. I was working in the inner city, and then I lost my own health, and was one of those people where I just didn't feel right. Like, I couldn't always articulate it. I would have memory fog. I would find my purse in the fridge. I wouldn't know where I parked the car. Like, could have no recollection. And it was because I was coming and going, and I had the most terrible fatigue, and I just kept thinking, I've got 3 young kids, we're all tired, I'm working.
And I bet there's lots of people like listening to you saying, gosh, they can respond to loads of this, the tiredness, the fog, finding things in strange places, what was I going to say next? And we do sort of settle sometimes for this.
We do.
I just feel a bit sluggish or foggy, and an early night and I'll be all right, but actually that's not really
and I went to the GP almost dreading it because because I knew I didn't fit any particular criteria. And you have the blood test, I told them normal, and then that went on for about 10 months, and then I couldn't coordinate my legs on the treadmill anymore, and it was very intermittent, but I would have to think about where I was putting my legs, and I went back.
Was that frightening?
Yeah, absolutely terrifying. And the first thing as a doctor, I was thinking, oh no, I've got multiple sclerosis. And so I went back to my GP and I said, this isn't normal. And so I got referred to a neurologist and had scans and what have you. And which was terrifying, being on the other side of that system. And in the end, got my diagnosis, got my label, got given drugs that made me feel awful. And I went back to my neurologist and I said, is there anything I can do to help me feel better? And he slipped another prescription across the table at me and said, Sally, try this. And it was the breaking point for me, because I thought, no, you are not telling me what's wrong with me, and you're not telling me what my body needs. And so from there, I went back to the books, like what's happening at a cellular level, what is the root cause of this, what's going on with my gut health, hormones, all of this. And then fell into this incredible world of physicians who have been asking these questions for 30, 40 years.
And you found at home?
Yeah, I did. And I found a whole group of people that were asking and practicing medicine very differently. And their key convictions being, your body's wired to heal, genetically. It's wired to survive. It's got all of these mechanisms, but you need to create the right environment in order to give your body what it needs. And that's why I kind of... I did some training or what have you, but I wanted to make it really simple. And on the whole, the key sort of foundations that underpin that create an environment where your body can do what it's wired to do, are sleep, movement, nutrition, rest and connection. And the science for each of those areas is phenomenal, like what's happening at a cellular level, some of the research in animals, but also some research in humans. It is just amazing, and it has changed so much from when I sort of trained in the 90s. So the science was there, and then practically, how we do that was there. And I reversed my own illness. I've been unwell for 10 months. It took me 3 weeks to get back to.
So you basically tested out everything that you were learning on yourself.
Absolutely, and then anybody that let me have a go, and then I started. Like, people started to get better, like things that I'm told shouldn't get better, rheumatoid arthritis and lupus and thyroid issues and things that you do think you can reverse, like fatty liver and diabetes and obesity. But I just started to get loads of people seeing them get better, and in the end it was just, I can't just keep this to myself anymore, and I cannot keep doing this style of general practice for 10 minutes. When 90% of illness is rooted in lifestyle, not our genetics, it's the lifestyle decisions. And so lifestyle illnesses needs a lifestyle approach, and you can't do that in 10 minutes.
So you would then, by changing the way you did life and the way you did your medicine, you've been able to bring your purpose in line with what you really believe on the core levels, which must make you feel so much more well in yourself too, and not compromised anymore.
Absolutely. Like that there's some beautiful research around looking at purpose and longevity. So if you look, there's these areas in the world called the blue zones. Have you heard of blue zones? So
oh yes, I have. Is that like Piopi? Is that a blue zone?
Oh, no. I don't know. There's the Piopi diet. Yeah. That's a great consultant cardiologist called Asim Malhotra. But no, the blue zones are these beautiful areas around the world. There's 5 of them where they live really long and there's less chronic disease. And we've been studying them for decades and trying to work out why. We're all looking for that kind of magic ingredient. Get your turmeric and then we'll all live forever, and whatever it is. But what they've done is created a number of points around what they do that's common between all of these areas that help longevity. And one of those is purpose. It's really strong. If they know when they get up at 100 what they're getting up for.
Really.
And so purpose is so, and that's part of one of my foundations. I talk about connection. Yes. And it's connection with self. We need to be mindful and listen to what our body's saying and be present. Connection with others, because we know that social isolation drives disease, but connection with that sense of purpose, whether that's faith or whether that's meaning. And certainly for me, I remember kind of doing all of this learning those 4 or 5 years ago. I'd wake up in the middle of the night going, oh my goodness, this is just phenomenal. Everybody needs to know. We can make people well. This is why I became a doctor.
Wow. So all those sort of years along the way, you hit a point where you're like, actually, this is why I've done this, and this is my life's call, almost ambition to see people have their health back.
And I think that's where our own personal suffering, often we have to go through that in order to find that new life and that thing that we're searching for. And certainly on reflection, I mentioned being unwell those few years ago, but I got terrible postnatal depression with my first 2 children. I've got 3 girls, and it was hideous at the time. Some of the blackest years of my life. I would never change it now, because it's changed how I see depression, and it's changed how I connect with my women who I work with who have depression, and so
nothing's wasted.
Nothing's wasted. So
Wow. So tell me how you got to the 5 foundations then? To narrow it down to, how did that take place?
Subsequently, Dr. Chatterjee, he's another guy that's really into lifestyle medicine. He talks about the 4 pillars, I think, and so it was a completely separate thing. But I think I'm like you, where it's that how I need to give people something to do.
They can grasp.
And part of my story is, and it's not dissimilar to yours, is, we went and lived in the inner city where I was a GP, You know, it's labelled one of the poorest estates in the UK, and it certainly wasn't my experience that there was so much wealth and riches there, and that's a whole other story.
Yeah.
But I didn't want some high convoluted ideas about health. I wanted them to be grounded in reality.
Yeah.
And I wanted a language, you know, to be able to articulate that, and for people to be able to get hold of that really practically. And so it was through learning all the science and then trying to pull it down in a way that people could get hold of and use on a day-to-day basis. So it was kind of just born out of wrestling what that might look like and how to articulate that.
It's amazing. And when you look sort of ahead to the next period of time for you, what's your goal in what you're doing? How do you want to see this?
I want to win the heart of the nation.
Yes, that's a good one. Just go big. What about globe?
My heart and my passion is I want people to know how to get well. And there's so much rubbish out there. There's so much sense
and fear.
What's the word? When they sensationalism.
Sensationalism and catastrophizing as well.
And you know, people doing this radical diet for 3 weeks and never feeling they can sustain it. And I just want to be, you know, amongst those sensible voices that creates plans for people where they can lean into health and reverse disease and and plans that are sustainable.
In it for the long haul.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's where I would love to get to, is just helping us as a nation reverse disease.
Amazing. Thanks, Sally.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you. It's great to talk to you and hear much more about the heart behind what you're doing and how you've got to where you've got to.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Hannah.